Tyler Verdon, resident of Essex. I'm a project executive with a Boston-based Wise Construction. We do a lot of commercial construction, hospitals, science tech. Recently enjoyed the entire process of the Manchester Memorial School Building Committee, and happy to be a part of this one.
Thank you very much. Do we think, is that everyone or calling user? Do we think that's a?
We can ask, is
Calling user one, are you a member of this committee or a public member observing?
Hi.
I'm a public member.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
welcome.
Well, welcome. So thank you all. Now we all know each other. As you can see, we have quite a depth of experience here, which is really wonderful moving forward. So the committee configuration, as you've all noticed, it is a large group. And as Pam mentioned, that part of the goal would be to promote inclusivity for those who have been interested, while also keeping a balance across the two towns, ability to have vote and walk there. So it is a large group, but I'm sure that we will be able to work effectively and efficiently. The charge and responsibilities of this group has been provided. Pam had emailed it out. It's also on the back of the first page of your packet, on the back of the agenda. Does anyone have any questions about what our charge and responsibilities are as a group? We are an appointed group, separate from the school committee, but the school committee does ultimately authorize the work moving forward. However, this group does steer the project, and we will have a communication going through John, who is not here, so he'll probably be here soon, and myself as the school committee representative. But this group, of course, will drive the work going forward. But does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Can you just tell me, is this different at all than the Memorial School charge? It isn't.
No.
So nothing has changed in terms of what MSBA is expecting of us.
The charge is actually drafted by the school committee, reflective of the MSBA, but my recollection is we arrived at it going forward with the memorial project, just to make sure that the lines of communication were clear between what the building committee owned and the school committee owned, and to ensure that even though there was a delineation of responsibilities, there would be communication back. So I think that's part of the goal behind the charge.
And so the building committee reports to the school committee through the facilities subcommittee. And in the past, you would go on to them and said, this is what's happening with the building project, basically on time, on budget kind of things. And that same expectation is here. And we approve invoices, but they ultimately are approved at the school committee level. I'm just trying to think about kind of what the process is, because it was different for the high school than it was for Memorial School, right? And there was sometimes, I think, some posturing of school committee reps at building committee that didn't happen at Memorial in the Memorial project. So just wanted to.
That posture is quite strong.
Yes, I know, but this was.
So if you take something like the voucher example, this group is watching the project from start to finish.
Yeah.
It's a group of citizen experts in the building and education field. So it functions as a large subcommittee that says, we've evaluated this, we've approved it for payment. Now the school committee is just supposed to do its kind of oversight duty and make the final okay, with trust in this group that we're doing our due diligence.
Yeah.
That's on the payment side. MSBA is going to kind of dictate the decision tree, things we have to make decisions on, the time in which we have to make decisions on, what we can consider in that decision making. So we have a lot of direction that didn't exist for the middle high school process. And I think when we added the layer of the charge for the memorial process, it was knowing that we had a clear set of instructions, like a driver's manual, on how to go about the process of overseeing the project. But a sense that we wanted to ensure that the school committee felt informed of things that were happening along the way, and not just the second one. So I think that's what we're going to continue to do. You have the subcommittee representation that can report back. I usually include it in my reports. Michelle will always be there to speak to the finances. And we always have Jason as well, and Kim. So I think there's a lot of cross-pollination. And does that address the concern?
Yeah, I mean, I always think that it's important for a building or for a school committee to kind of be watching building committee and to come and be informed about the decisions that are made before sometimes things are said at school committee meetings that may not be as informed as they could be. Great, that's that.
And our school committee members were invited to come to this meeting as well. So in future, others may choose to do so. Any other questions about the charge and responsibilities? All right, then just as a reminder, open meeting law does apply. This is an official body. These are posted public meetings. We won't get into all the details, but it does mean that the agenda is posted in advance and also that minutes will be taken. I've asked Andy to take notes today on the same level of detail as what has been done for the Memorial School Building Committee at this point. And then once, my understanding, many of you are more experienced than I am at this, but my understanding is that once an OPM has been identified, they will be taking care of all of that for us. So in the meantime, we'll just sort of go with the flow on this. Anyone have questions about open meeting law or how that applies to this?
I did not know that if you text someone during a meeting, that is part of the open meeting record.
Anybody or just people on the committee?
When we're in a meeting, during a meeting, if you're texting about that meeting, if somebody's texting you about that meeting, or you're texting someone else about that meeting, that's.
So the text that I sent to Lisa would be subject.
So as we go
I
forward,
didn't get
If
it.
that had,
that brings up a good point. What we will do going forward is establish everyone with an MERSD public records account. That way they're all of our correspondence, we can have it forwarded to your personal accounts. But that way there, if for some reason we make a decision that somehow doesn't sit well with people and then there's a request for public record, they're pulling from the public record email that is associated with the committee. I can't ensure that if it gets so heated that if they don't, and you're doing emails to one another from your home account, that when it gets swept in. But what I tell the employees, when you're sitting on a board, everything we do has to be done in public, all of our deliberations. So there should be a subsection of the group emailing of their thoughts or ideas about upcoming agenda items or items that were previously discussed in a meeting. All of that is subject to a public records request, and that also would constitute deliberation outside of the public body. So if you have, this is kind of an open forum. If you've got something to say, it should be said here. Our deliberations should take place live in public. I'll make I think a good number of us sit on other boards or have had experience on other boards. So we didn't want to belabor this too much, but I'm happy to supply anyone. I'll put it in our shared file, the open meeting law kind of primer. That way there, if you have any questions about someone you want to email or a question that you might have, you can check there. Please feel free to just pick up the phone or shoot me an email. I'm happy to kind of walk you through anything that might be.
Will that cover some basics, like you just said, about emailing other members of the committee about something about an agenda item? Right, is that
That's it.
something we're not supposed to do that?
You're not supposed to do that.
Well, yes, you can, I can talk to him. I can't talk to a forum.
It's tightened up quite a bit over time, so any back and forth that constitutes kind of decision-making or deliberation, I would strongly recommend you stay away from.
Isn't that
I
the
mean,
line
can you,
in deliberation?
can you email your sister and say?
Yes, you can email your sister.
Whatever.
as long as she's not on this board.
But isn't it true if there's a decision to be made or a deliberation on a particular decision? We can't have that without the full
body.
body being present.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
It's subject to open meeting. It doesn't mean you can't do it. Right?
Well, I suppose there's what is physically possible.
No, I mean, I don't know why I couldn't ask him. I don't know. Okay. You sure? It's been a public record? Fine, I don't care.
Well, the deliberation issue is going to turn into a public relations concern, because if you're having subsections of your committee having email conversations about business before the body, it's not being done in public. If you email me a question about something that's coming up on the agenda, I'm the hired manager, so I can respond to you. If you have a question, what does deliverables mean on the upcoming agenda? Better to email me and say, I think it's a problem for several people, and I email out the response. What you don't want to do is get into back and forths among members of the group in email. We've been cautioned about it. Nobody's gonna police it for you, but it's probably best for the body for us to stay away from.
But Pam, I don't want to get into weeds too much.
Yeah.
But we're about to enter a phase where the OPM will be selected and construction manager will be selected and an architect will be selected based on the same. I assume there'll be a smaller subgroup which will do it more deliberation and a deep dive into the proposals and then discuss it amongst themselves and before it's presented to the larger group. Is that fair to say? Or not?
I have to go back and look at what we did last time.
That's kind of what we did. but
Yeah, we did
that's what I-
So there can be,
Some subcommittees.
that you can have subcommittees. Subcommittee work has changed over time as well. Subcommittees now are all subject to public posting in open meeting.
Wow, okay. Oh, that's a good point there.
What I don't know, Gordon, I don't want to send us down a rabbit hole. I can certainly get clarification. If, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable answering the question right now. Does an SBC have an option for having a working group separate from that of what a school committee can have? School committee can't have a working group anymore. It's any group or subgroup is a subcommittee and subject to open meeting. Because this is a different kind of group, I'm not sure if we're allowed to have working groups of, like we did last time, we had the designers
We had a design.
who met and got feedback from and gave feedback to our Congress architect.
Right.
But that's something I would discuss with the OPM once they're on board, make sure we are current. There's been an evolution over time of what is allowed and not allowed under public meeting. I don't know how that's bled into impacting the SBC process.
You'll be the arbiter of,
I'll be the arbiter, I'll also be the researcher.
Can you give us some more clarity on that?
Really clear, we shouldn't be emailing amongst the group on any topic before the body. I know I sound like
Yeah, you sound.
like a bureaucrat right now, but. And I mean, I'm open, I'm not running the show, this is our team, so people who are sitting on boards. If you're interpreting differently or you're getting different legal interpretation.
What I can say from the school committee perspective is that caution is the best idea right now because this is so visible and everything that comes before the school committee is so visible and so important that it's been worthwhile to be on the safest side of open meeting law at this point.
Right, that's generally, this is Adam, I was just gonna chime in. I mean, I'm not an expert in open meeting law per se, but it's one of those better safe than sorry type situations where there's also a concept called serial communication where you might send something to someone thinking that it's just sort of a private thing. It's not really a deliberation. We're not talking about group business, but then if it's forwarded or this really applies to social media posts and things like that, which should always be avoided. It's just you just never want to have a situation where you even have the appearance that we're discussing or deliberating on something that's before the board. Particularly in the real estate context where we're going to need public votes and public support, and the easiest way to lose that is with a foot fault on open meeting law violation. It can wither away the trust that the community has in the process, and really come back to be counterproductive for us. So I would just always caution, just better safe than sorry, and keep all of the deliberations or discussions to the meetings themselves.
I think probably best though to send out to the group a simple primer on where things stand right now for people who have served in the past but are coming back into it a different way. Any other questions on that? All right, then on to background and review of eligibility period requirements. Would you like to take that? I'll try. If you do that with your.
Well, quite a few people in here could probably do this one with our eyes closed right now. So this is the briefest version I could find that gave enough of an explanation to kind of see how the process flows through without printing out reams of it. So on the top of the sheet, you just have the general steps in the MSBA building process. Those in green are done for us. Those in blue are done by us, I think is the general rule of thumb, which means we'll be contracting with external experts to take us through these different periods of study and come up with conclusions, and they will be advisory to us, but we have oversight over them. So what ties into the big deliverable later in the agenda is we are currently in the eligibility period, so the first blue box, which means we've been doing a lot of data collection to show our worthiness to proceed in the process, right? There's, at this point, technically no guarantee that we get advanced to feasibility. We know we're in good standing. We've made all of our deadlines. The enrollment report is complete. It looks like we have sufficient enrollment to proceed with the project. They've given us their design enrollment number. That's the next document we're going to look at. So we're just about ready to exit eligibility. We'll be putting in our last deliverable at the end of August, and that's just a maintenance. It's basically an operations maintenance report. We crossed our highest hurdle last spring with voting funding for a feasibility study. So once all of those pieces are submitted and we approve the design enrollment and the feasibility scope, they'll put us in the queue for a board meeting. So every step in this process has to go through board meeting approval to move to the next stage. So I'm assuming by mid-September, everything's submitted, tied up, and we're on an agenda for October or November, maybe December of this year. At that meeting, they'll formally pass us through. Hopefully, they'll pass us through to the feasibility study, which brings about our first big deliverable for this group, which is hiring the owner's project manager. It's a big piece, but then it is a lot of front-loaded work. But then once that team is on, they're going to take over running these meetings, and they're going to march us through this process, being advisors to us. And everything about what should come before the body, how it should come before the body, how we can best maximize the feasibility dollars that we have to achieve the outcomes we need to from the scope of work that we're signing on for. So that's, to Gordon's point, there's a lot of work that goes into this. I will do my research to figure out how we can best construct that to make it an efficient process. But my recollection is that there will be a point where we're going to have to book a few nights in a row to see presentations to the full board and vote to select that person going forward. Even after we do that, our selection has to be approved by MSBA. So we do nothing without that second check by MSBA to make sure we followed the rules and regulations to go through the selection process. It's kind of just a check and balance. Starting out in the memorial project, I know the previous group didn't have it and it seemed rather cumbersome. From my perspective, it's a nice set of guardrails and a really clear set of instructions to follow to make sure everybody is doing these projects the same way. So I think it's a help in the end. Sometimes it'll feel a little constraining, but I think if we get the right teams in place, they'll be able to help us navigate and make sure that we're not being run by the process, but the process is supporting us in our goals. That's my best summary of right now, to give you a sense of how long this could go, and certainly life will change and you may not all be here. I hope as many of you are. We're in project closeout for the Memorial School right now. So we started that in 2016 and it's 2014. So it kind of gives you a sense of beginning to end. But those of you who do this for a living, I kind of feel like once we get pushed into feasibility, get the project team on board, it starts to ramp up pretty quickly. And that's the fun part, where we're really engaging the community in what are all the possibilities and what are the ideas. Always the phrase, you'll be tired by the end, most cost-effective solution that supports the program. So happy, please, those of you who do this, jump in, explain something that you feel like I've missed, or give some color commentary if you like about any aspect of the process.
I think following the module is great because of the fact that MSBA insists on it and it keeps you from getting too distracted. So if you know your mission, get through the module is to do this, then it keeps from going off tangents and bunny trails. So I think it's actually a good way for us.
Any other comments on that?
When did the 270-day period begin and what day are we in today?
Can't tell you what, that's a hard question to do like off the top of my head. It began March, beginning of March. It's the end of November, somewhere in the 20s range. We'll be well. We should be wrapped up by September 15th.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Is there, obviously there's details to these modules, like you said, this is the most compressed form. I assume there's a detailed on the MSBA website, you can get the full run through of
Yeah,
all the nuts and bolts.
and I'm happy to put the full, I'll send you the link. Any one of these on this online is clickable and we'll bring up all of them. It wasn't getting fit. I do have a condensed version I'm happy to share. I've been using it at school committee. That is kind of a summary checklist of the highlights of each of the different stages. Feasibility is a pretty, we call it a feasibility study, but it's really feasibility and schematic design are together as one chunk, because you start by looking at potential options, but you have to bring it, to get to the vote, you've got to identify an option to fully build out and then bring it to the public.
And budget that, right? Because you don't have it, you can't budget unless you have a schematic set up, so.
And our experience last time was, the advice given to us last time, don't talk about money until you kind of lay out the framework of what you're designing, because essentially it all comes down to square footage to meet your program. And then what are the extras that you might want on top of it? If people cautioned us from floating a number, because the number that you float at the start of the process, there's so many things in the world that can happen to cause that number to go up. You can mislead people or alarm people unnecessarily until you really dig into it. So
I think that's really true, that you don't want to get hung up where somebody in town meeting says, but you said 3 months ago it was this, and it's now that. However, during the deliberation about the right option, there needs to be a way to talk about costs. And I've seen it done in a million ways, but sometimes there's $2 sign versus $3 sign. There's 4 asterisks and there's 6 asterisks. But you got to remember that the decision matrix and the decision-making process does include cost. It's just not $10. It's $3 signs. So that $10 is floating out there. However, we didn't pick that option because it was evident to us that, it was twice as much money. And we don't know what the dollar is, but we know it was twice as much because it was more complicated phasing. We had a 500-foot long forced sewer main, or we had, whatever it was. So money does come into it, it just comes into it in an abstract way. Until you get a schematic design. But I think it's true, because otherwise you're just stuck with a number that everyone remembers.
and then you try and
And then you're trying to explain why it went up.
Any other questions? All right.
just maybe, Charlie, would you talk a little bit about like the site selection process? Because I know that's on people's mind and where that comes in and how that plays out.
Well, we'll come in till module 3, you need an architect generally. It'll be, the MSBA insists on a review of all available sites in town. And they'll ask for that. And we have certainly had projects where or the OPM has stated there are no available sites other than the existing school site. We've had actual detailed studies of multiple sites, site plan for multiple sites. We've had, there are 5 sites, but 3 of them are so restricted by wetlands that you can't use them, or they're conservation land, or we've had a multitude of different outcomes. But yeah, they're going to insist on that. It's in their regs. And then, so the architect needs to be prepared to do at least conceptual studies of if there are available sites, what those are, and also deed restrictions and all those good things, and costs. Cost of during the project, very rare when it's buys a piece of land. I've never seen it happen, but that would be on the table if it was, well, we can buy it from so and so. So that'll be important. Yeah, that's vital, and it will be but it shouldn't even be discussion for a while yet. Without a designer, you don't want to get into it.
So I have a question around that. I began to read the, I guess, the capital needs assessment report. And it appeared as if there were two options there.
Well, there shouldn't be two options right now. There should be zero options.
That's exactly my question.
Yeah.
My question, to hear that there are options for other sites,
That
is
would
that-
only come out of.
is
the
that
study.
part of this feasibility study?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's because the MSBA asks, for it. They say,
Oh.
tell us, and as I said, we've had plenty of communities that say there's absolutely period zero options. There is our site with our school on it, figure out how to put either a new school on it or an addition renovation on it. There are communities who said, yeah, we have 3 pieces of land that you might be able to use. I will tell you, oh, I want to get the punchline.
From this process, or that Memorial School are still on the site, aren't they? And then we also did one for this twice, didn't
My
we?
goodness, we did site studies looking all over.
Yeah. So you can get a sense of.
Brand new.
And, you know, the problem is you keep looking at them and you find out, oh, there's 8 bazillion feet of ledge. You know, that's what's self-signaling. Well, that was one of the sites over there.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just not feasible.
Yeah,
Well, that may be a good
Segue.
segue into the next item on the agenda as well, because as part of this process, as this process unfolds, part of that conversation will include a discussion of enrollment. And I'm going to have Pam go through the enrollment report. Everyone should have received the letter regarding the design enrollment projections and also the certification form that we'll need to vote to accept this letter tonight and then complete the certification and return it as part of module 1. But part of the conversation that has come out of budget conversations in the last couple of years is whether or not it is wise to, or the best thing to move forward with a full K-5 elementary school at Essex again, or whether we need to look at the enrollment numbers and consider other options, whether it be a breakdown of merging everybody at Memorial and perhaps adapting Memorial, or whether it could be building a smaller K-3 or pre-K-3 and then merging 4 and 5 over to Memorial. This is a conversation that has been happening within the community and has come through school committee quite a few times in the budget process. And so that is something that Pam has been in close contact with the MSBA personnel to see, is that something that we can build into this process? And maybe let you explain that a little bit better, along with what we've got before us.
So Charlie, I appreciate you kind of explaining where site selection happens, because it's not us, it's not the school committee, it's not, you know, Pam, Jason, and Michelle, the principals trying to pick a place for the school. It goes through a professional analysis of what is feasible. And then if feasible, is it cost effective and does it support the program? So long story short, for those of you who have been part of this process for a long time, before we move forward with Memorial School as the build, we did an extensive community study, community outreach led by school committee members to ask the question, should we merge the schools? Should we build a pre-K 2 in one town and a 3-5 or 4-5 in another? Should we put everybody here at the Memorial site? So we went through a lot of iterations, and I think the consensus document showed that the communities wanted to retain elementary buildings in each town. They were critical parts of the community. So we moved forward with that as the backdrop and moved Memorial ahead due to the facility study that we received at the time, showing that it was essentially a money pit. It was going to cost an exorbitant amount of money to keep that going if we had advanced with Essex. MSBA agreed with us, and they took it. Again, we got very lucky and we got in on our first submission of an SOI. But that was done almost in a 2-phase concept where once that was completed, we would then submit a new statement of interest for Essex Elementary, which is now 8 years older. And again, we were taken in on the first. So we've always been operating that it was going to be middle high school, then figure out which elementary needs to go first, and then once that school is done, we move on to the next. That being said, that study was done 2013 and it's now 2024. So while from my perspective, it is still very relevant and reflects the will of the community, I think we are getting a lot of inputs. There's been a lot of discussion about enrollment decline, and a lot of question as to whether or not we shouldn't be considering or reconsidering some of the things studied in that report, given new information before us, because we are probably building a building in the $50 to $70 million range, likely. Before you invest at that level, maybe we should kick the tires on that again. That being said, and stop me if I'm veering off or if I'm confusing you. When we submitted for Essex Elementary School, that wasn't a conversation that was taking place. So the statement of interest was for study of Essex Elementary School and the students within Essex Elementary School. That's how we were invited into the process. So from the MSBA's perspective in the spring when we were talking to them, that was the scope of the work to be done. We have introduced to them during our enrollment meetings that these are concerns that are being raised and might have some potential impact on whether or not we're able to bring a project to fruition in Essex. And they have written into our scope of work that our professional team will be able to evaluate the ideas that have been presented to us, whether or not Memorial School could be considered a site. I think from what I've heard and others who have taken the input, please share your perspective. I think there's a sense that because enrollment has declined, that building could hold all of the students. Our back of the envelope says, no, it's designed for approximately 320, 330, and our total enrollment at elementary is 500 plus. There aren't enough classrooms, but that's not a professional assessment. And I certainly, in our local team, can't tell you whether or not you could expand the building. My recollection from our work on the previous committee is that there was a contingency plan built in to go up. I think that's what they did, so that if you had to, you could take the roof off and add another level. Those of you who have done these projects, that's a massive undertaking that disrupts. So we need the professionals to look at it and say, yes, it's viable. No, it's not viable. The other thing we've been asked to look at is potentially sending all of the older students to Essex Memorial School and just looking at a renovation or replacement in Essex for the lower grades, so kind of an early childhood school. So they have agreed to let us kind of examine those questions with professional assistance as part of this, with our main look still being replacement of Essex Elementary, renovation or replacement of Essex Elementary. So that's what this letter details.
At 250.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question about that process?
Yeah.
So, is that kind of a phase event that we answer the question and put it to bed, report to them and then put it to bed, or is it kind of part of the bigger submission at the end? Do you know what I mean? Like, how does that?
That's where I need Charlie's help.
I think you have to put it to bed. I don't think you can come out of feasibility study without a preferred option.
Right, but I'm just.
Preferred option to do with size and location.
Right, so can we like midway through say, we're not looking at that anymore, we're looking at this?
You have to.
So, okay, that's.
But I mean, if there's 3 scenarios, I think they have to be, 2 of them have to be ruled out prior to completing feasibility study. You can't say, this is what we want to go into schematic design with. Can't do that. Schematic design is the thing you need to cost. Ask the sort of pounds. So I think you have to. I think that's sort of basic building block, which
That's how I.
complicates.
So you start with the 3%.
Because there's also a real political issue here, which is that if you alienate a ton of voters by, or district residents by saying, we're going with this enrollment plan, then you're wasting a whole lot of time by
Yeah.
going with that option. So it's taking the temperature, which is more of a political issue than a planning issue. Taking the temperature of the 2 communities and what they want is really super important in assessing. I've done some of that, but that's kind of beyond this committee's sort of purview. It's more what will people support as a configuration, right?
But I'm wondering,
unless you could literally just put all the kids into Memorial to tomorrow without spending a dime and just do that.
Yeah.
That would be, then it doesn't matter, you're not going to asking anything for anyone.
My sense, should jump in here, is that there needs to be a third party to analyze technically whether it's feasible.
But my question is, can you tell the MSBA in the piece, like before that, during the course of that work, we're done exploring that option. This is the option that works, that we're really going to build out in feasibility. You see, like, you have to report it to them and get an approval from them. That's,
You're gonna start with the 3, but Charlie, doesn't it, your narrow down is gonna be when you go to preferred schematic design. You're
Correct.
not
So I
looking
think
at all 3.
the design program, which is the PDP, I would say, you would say, well, here are our 7 options. Option 1 is all the kids in Manchester. Option 2 is half the kids in Essex. And option 3 is whatever. And option 3 is on this site, and option 4 is on that site, and option 5 is round, and option 6 is triangular. And I would also caution about too many options. One of the things I think we did a little bit wrong, one of us not too many options, is it's a common plan. So the ones that really matter, right? But then at that juncture, they will insist in the next phase, at the ESR phase, that you have preferred option.
okay.
And so right, so the professionals can give guidance on the feasibility of moving things over there, whatever capacity, whatever. However, in the end, I'm saying there's a political component. It's not about architecture, or about planning.
So part of, I think the problem we find ourselves with is we have constituents who would like to know the answers to those questions. We don't have the authority to move anybody at this point because the regional agreement would have to be changed.
Right.
And MSBA has been clear that if in your study, it's emerging that one of the 2 options that requires some redistricting emerges, that they will work with us, but we're going to have to, in short order, change the regional agreement. So we have the authority to submit the plan in the first place.
Right.
So I think a question with our OPM, as we start to approach working with an architect, is there a mini phase we can build in as a kind of a tier 1 to sort through the redistrict versus no redistrict person? I don't know if you've had any experience.
Yes, the answer is yes, you can. You could just say, we're going to focus the first 2 months of this effort on this issue. This problem.
I can say from the school committee part of this, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg scenario because the school committee is wanting to know, are these things possible? And what is kind of the cost benefit of those options?
Feasibility study could simply be, you just tell the OPM and the architect, this is all, the rest of the stuff can wait. We need to focus on this one question.
But we can bang that out fairly quickly, right?
So I'm clear, what the question at hand is one question. What is that? Frame that question.
What is the question?
Yeah, what is the question? Whether we stay in Essex, whether we move over
Yeah.
Manchester?
If enrollment has declined, can you put all of the students in one facility, the existing facility? Or if you can't get them all in, can you split them up and get some in and then build a smaller school in Essex? I think the thought process being that might be more cost effective. It's the community inputs that we're getting. I can recall from the Memorial School, people have a lot of ideas about how it can go. I think I'll be very frank, I think it also ties back to some of the financial budgetary discussions we've been having, which is we're going to invest in a new building and we're charging forward on that, but it seems like there's an ongoing conversation about the operating budget and how you're going to fund it. So why would we do one thing if we can't figure it? So a lot of things have just kind of coalesced to create some energy around these 2 questions. And again, I don't pretend to tell you whether it's 10 people or, 1,000 people who are having this conversation. I think in talking with MSBA, we can look at other communities that if you don't, my concern would be that we don't address this up front, and then you go to schematic design and you're going out for full support. And then you have a community or like a grassroots group that pops up and says, you need to do your due diligence to look at this.
I agree. But I think, it's these 3, right? And it's these 3 where? The steering wheel protection for the ones the MSBA is telling us we can look at. And then it's where you put it. So you could put more, you could put all of them, well, you could bring Memorial to absolutely build a brand new Feathers to school in Essex, right? So it's just, it's what you want, what you want.
You've got to deal with it.
That's great.
So, it's just a question of playing out all the scenarios. And I think really it's going to come down mostly to what does moral fit.
Yeah, it's a pretty basic question. How many more kids can you fit in Memorial? If you can't fit all of them in, how many could you fit in with some modification?
Right.
And that's a simple, then they just get to that answer. Depending on what that looks like, then it's, then
You
it either works or doesn't.
series of choices.
So I'm trying to recollect whether we put
I don't remember.
whether we made arrangements to add a top floor into the educational
I
building.
have no memory of that.
I don't have any memory of it either.
I don't remember that
We
at all.
put the rooftop piers right on top.
Yeah,
of
and
the center.
The chief mentioned that he thought going up was what we had talked
So
about.
let's put it this way, with the right amount of money, you can do whatever you want. That's practical, that's still today, but.
I think it's communicated in the letter, that MSBA is only going to pay for accommodating the added students. So if we add 250 students to Memorial School, they'll pay for classrooms, the additional classrooms. If we have to go in and kind of reconfigure something that is currently existing, like the office, to make room for another nurse or to make room for another psychologist or more small group, they're not going to contribute financially to reconfiguring existing Memorial, only to adding the square footage necessary to accommodate the new. So you have to think about your core spaces, like the cafeteria wasn't built for 515 kids.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where
That's great.
I feel like I've had experience with this. I know kind of how a building runs. My common sense analysis, it just isn't getting traction. So I do think there's some value in having experts give us some answers.
We don't want remember the well problem that really just kept plaguing us in this high school project? I mean, you don't want this to be your albatross, right? So better to just address it.
And as far as, Charlie, you make a good point that there's a political side to this. And as far as that goes, it will be really helpful if we're able to address this right up front with some professionals, get some actual answers about here's what makes the most sense from an economic standpoint and from what's actually possible with these numbers. And then the school committee can discuss that as well and then take the political part of that and move forward.
And then when does the community part come into play?
Once the OPM helps us bring on an architect, and then they'll lead the charge there.
Charge for what is the surveys, community input, and
They're going to guide us through it.
they'll guys through it. Okay, so I'm sure that could play a factor, right?
Considering the complexity now that I'm aware of all this, the complexity is now does the community get involved earlier to opine on.
Yeah, that was
direction
kind of
we
my,
should take?
right, that was kind of
That
my
was
thoughts, my question. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
sort of follow these.
Yeah.
Which means I would wait.
The way I'm envisioning this, and you can stop me.
Sure.
The way I'm picturing this is if, like you said, right up front, we say, here's an X amount of time that we're going to take to dedicate toward this and then come up with this within this group, those concrete answers, then go to the school committee that at that point, there will be, and really looking at the time frame, will be in budget conversations. So, that's the kind of thing that will be going on and people will almost certainly bring their opinions and
Well, I mean, you could have
comments
public hearing
there.
during that phase. I just wouldn't do it before.
Yeah, don't
It's not
make it part of the curriculum.
Don't make it so early though. But I think if you did it during that discussion about, as you say.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, obviously, the Essex parents have had Essex Elementary since 1950, and your option could be to go to Memorial.
I think we have to, school side has to stay away from that piece of the conversation right now. I think really what I'm kind of putting before this body is more, we have a lot of opinion about what could be done. We have a lot of individual common sense approaches to maybe how we should be dealing with this. What we need is a technical expert answer as to whether or not it is truly feasible to even hold that opinion. My concern with a simple survey is, yes, it sounds good on paper, but we don't hold the authority to do it yet. You don't have a regional agreement that even really allows us to ask that question at this moment in time because we can't execute on it. And we have no real facts or data to support the theory that it would be more cost effective if it's even feasible from a physical standpoint.
The other thing, Jason, is we just delivered a product to the district and the town of Manchester. And now you want to go in and mess up this product that costs a ton of money.
Yeah.
You mean the elementary?
Yeah, like, I mean, as a Manchester voter, I would be pissed.
Yeah.
Is there any consideration in the enrollment projections about like the Affordable Housing Act that's just been passed and all the new regulations around making housing more accessible and
There is.
plentiful?
And it's in this too.
It is, and there is a secondary report with what Michelle and I have seen, but cannot, you have, which we'll make available to you so you can dig in. And if we can't vote on this tonight, because there's a lot here, we can do this again in September. We do have until the end of November before we have to make it official.
This is the enrollment letter?
There's the enrollment report, the actual technical report that supports.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, the bottom line is that the MSBA additionally is not particularly warm and fuzzy about modifying it once they've issued it. It takes a real act of Congress to get them to change it. So, you know, you could say, well, I really think you should. It's not that.
They don't care.
They're just sort of like, this is what we're telling you it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about elementary schools, of course, is that they have usually even numbers of sections, which means you usually ought to be usually round up on classrooms. So if you're nervous about the 515, who knows where the 515 goes, but if you're nervous about the overall 515, you can probably make the building accommodate more than that without it having to accept the space template.
Can we talk about this, the number a little bit? Because it was
To
two
answer
things.
Lisa's question, we did have to report on all known potential building projects. So the 35 potential students coming from the affordable housing in Manchester's in there. My understanding is that because it's not really, it's a consideration, but not an action, a potential eviction, they're not necessarily counting it.
They all ask you for buildable lots, don't they?
It's all of it, yep. So we gathered that from the towns and reported what was able to be reported. They have most of it. It comes to you mostly pre-populated. And we just have to verify. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, we just got an application for 36 housing units in a field that hasn't been used. And there's a lot of fields like that around Essex. So I was just wondering how that's accounted for.
That's not, it just came in. It was known information as of February. As of February, so we submitted that for February. So if you just got applications, we didn't have that when we submitted.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's coming and there could be others in the whole, there's new things going out there now, so.
Yeah.
So Lisa,
Yeah.
you're concerned that that number is not going to be 250, it's going to be perhaps more?
I don't know, but you know, Essex for years, Essex has historically been underdeveloped because we were always on septic and now we're on limited sewer. There's not sewage capacity to reconstruction. But we're also, Gloucester is in the process of planning the reconstruction of their sewage facility. So there's significant potential that to defray their costs, they're going to turn around and say, hey, Essex, you want some more sewage? And that's been what's limited. We don't have sewage for new construction. So if we do get sewage capacity for new construction, there could be 2 families built, there could be 2 houses. We allow 2 houses on a lot that's over 70,000 square feet. So if that sewage dam breaks, we could see a lot more development. you know, and how do we even predict that? So I guess I'm just throwing that out there.
We're going to share the,
Saying these numbers are what Essex is gonna be looking at could be very misleading if we start to.
and that was the feeling, remember, when we were building Memorial. We did build in some extra classroom space anticipating their kids coming back or new families moving in. And I think the big surge we saw, and again, I take this from having conversations with the realtors in town, like, I don't know if you remember Linda Crosby, that when we're feeling like there's a huge decline in enrollment, we really experienced an uncharacteristic surge where we grew larger than we historically had been. So what we're feeling is the coming down from that now. A lot of folks were talking about the fact that it was kind of the perfect storm of coming out of the housing crisis, empty nesters leaving, creating a lot of capacity in town for families to actually get in and buy in. There's no way that can get predicted in any of this. So that could happen again, and we see both schools escalating. I think when you build to 250, if I recall, you actually probably have capacity to get closer to 300 kids in the building.
Yes, if you have even numbers of classrooms per grade, you make sure you round up. Have extra capacity. Just again, I'm just thinking about elementary schools.
Can you put an addendum, you know, can you, write something to amend to this letter or to the signature that says, just so you know, these two things have arisen in the town. This is also not, we didn't know about what's happening on Southern Ave either. And when we built the Memorial School.
I mean,
So,
if it makes sense, and we have a little time before our end of period, I can regather the information, send it to them. I tend to think Charlie's right. It probably won't be concrete enough to move the needle, but we can make them aware. And it'll give us time. I can dug up that tech report that goes behind here to show what they use to arrive at their number. So those who are good with numbers can look at it and make sense of it. And then we can come back on the 27th and approve it or not.
can I ask two questions? Or, so did you look at this? Because I looked at this and I said, okay, 250 divided by 2 divided by 6. And I came up with like 20 kids in the classroom, right?
Yeah, I looked at it and said, we're going right back to where we were before the enrollment decline.
So how big, the classrooms are designed for 23 students, is that right?
So typically it's whatever the school committee's limitation is on student per class.
18 to 22 for 3 to 5.
So that'd be 22, however you sort of, it's big enough for 25, and it's not 24, then you can do it. But typically we say we use the school committee's written policy as the maximum number of students per class.
In the bubble, what was the max number? Like, what was the rise? Like, what was the? Do you remember what where were we over capacity in per grade level? How many students was it? I know it was a couple, it's like.
So we went to one class at Essex needing to go from 2 sections to 3 sections for a bit. And 3 or 4 grade levels at Memorial that went up to, from 3 to 4 sections. And if I could, I would I cannot figure out a way to really explain what happened. Basically, Memorial popped and grew really quick. And now we're coming off of it and it's creating a lot of residual problems.
And they're not going to care about the bubbles anyway, right?
Well,
There's a projection of a year by year.
so
So
we do be good by year, if they look at it.
I think I'd feel more comfortable if we postponed it. I look at the technical report, kind of see how they came up with this. I communicate with them again, kind of what we're learning about some potential new projects and get a pretty clear handle on how if that would factor in. And then on the 27th, we can just vote for approve. I don't think it's going to hold up our timeline.
As a straw poll, is there anyone opposed to that course?
I mean, Lisa, you have your hand in the pulse of Essex future development in that you know every single parcel in the town. I mean, do you have a prediction that you can just provide to the town of places, developable lots that might get developed in the future? I mean, theoretically, they should have that too, right?
And this is their reimbursement number. This isn't, I mean, we can build, this committee, the town can choose to build more.
Well, right, and so they just they'll tell you it's ineligible, but right, I mean, you could put in a STEM lab that could become a classroom. You could decide you want a foreign language room. They say there's no way we're paying for your foreign language room, so you pay for it with all your, I'm saying you're on nickel. You could, I mean, there are ways also with sort of seeding a building with additional capacity that doesn't say it on the label, but
Would be,
could be used, yeah.
And
I will take a look at it, but we haven't really explored that much simply because of the sewerage option, because even in the sewer district where there are developable lots, there's not sewer capacity for it. And
I mean, obviously a lot, with a single house, that just do septic, that's different than multi-family development or something, right?
right.
the memorial committee did vote straight up to go with 3 classrooms per grade level.
Yeah.
That's what historically we've had,
Yeah. and you
because
wanna
they were
have-
very fearful the number was too low.
That's what the 250 would be.
250 is going to be the base number they use for reimbursement.
Right.
So the 250 divided by 20.
But that's 2 classrooms per grade, correct? But it doesn't account for the sped programs that we have.
That's a whole different template.
No, it doesn't. However, those don't go in. Those are additional capacity.
Still reimbursable though, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
But
like
if
this
you
is your
have-
base number, right? And then there's a whole different calculation for, like, they're gonna take our program. So the piece we're not talking about, and I think this is where I ultimately will always admit to some frustration, is they want to know what our program is. So if we do offer world language, which we have and will again, you can have a room for that and it is reimbursable. If you do have PE or need, or have a specialized special education program that needs a room that has bathrooms, that's reimbursable. So they're going to go through what we have, what we teach, how we teach it, and match the facility to those needs. It's when you get beyond, like, if I recall the conversation at Memorial School, there was that real concern that there was just the enrollment number was too low. It wasn't anticipating all of the potential things that could happen, and people wanted to build in extra classroom space. So their agreement was, we didn't get reimbursed on some of that classroom space. We went forward with it. So we could do that there, because you might know more 18 months from now. We're designing.
I do think it makes sense though to get
Yep.
the full report out so people can see how we came to all of these numbers. Everybody really can dive into that and then vote for the letter at our next meeting.
Can I just ask you a question? Even if I'm jumping around a little bit, but current Essex Elementary School, does it accommodate space-wise, the number of kids that are attending right now?
Are you asking me, do all the kids fit in the building, or do they fit in the building the right way?
Well, I know, having walked the building multiple times, I know that it'll fit in the building the correct way. There's so much infrastructure wise and envelope and everything else that needs to be correct over there.
There are enough classrooms, but there aren't enough of the modern spaces to accommodate all of the additional special ed program, small group intervention. There's not a really good place for like a psychologist. One of the adjustment counselors is in a converted locker room, so it's makeshift enough.
People sharing and using, and somebody leaves, somebody else occupies.
So we've repurposed spaces. They were using the basement room, which, I mean, if you've been down there, Kim, you should jump in. You're new to it.
Scary down there.
So far down there.
It's been
Downstairs, the boiler and everything.
Yeah, but I agree with what Pam said, that I feel like we have lost programs, assets that would be beneficial for them to have in that building. We've lost it because of spacing issues or like compliance issue, building compliance issue. So it's a shame.
I'm not probing whether we renovate, add, or anything else
No,
like that.
it's
The
a good
building
question.
itself, as it sits right now, does not accommodate what your ed program will plan to be, where it's currently configured.
No, there's enough classrooms for the classes, but it's not designed correctly. And what's catching up with us, I think, Kim, that's what you meant by compliance. It used to be the handicap accessible building because it had some makeshift ramps and Memorial had stairs everywhere. You couldn't get to one, from one place to another without stairs. We are not handicap compliant, so we have had to move programming out of Essex to Memorial because kids can't get around the building. So it's catching up.
Pam, has the change of the handicapped students out of Essex and over to Memorial for ADA compliance, did that number shift when the new building was built? Meaning, so the numbers from Essex, are those looking decreased because the students are over there? So the numbers you used to build Memorial were less when you built it, or did you shift the students to make the numbers?
We have kids shift every year for special ed based on program. We had Memorial kids at Essex. Some of them had to go back because it's one particular program that can't be there anymore. Because we've had increased need for handicap accessibility. That same program may have a year where we don't have anyone who is dependent on the building being accessible. Because it's kind of a mixed group of needs. I don't know if that's, if I would say you don't count on that special ed count in either building to be the same from year to year. It fluctuates.
So we're pausing on this letter,
Yes.
and then there's this other thing.
I think that makes sense. So yeah, we're not going to vote on accepting the letter at this point. That's the certification at the end, accepting the letter. We'll hold on that, get more information and get the report out to everyone and take that back up next month. But we have next steps, first being deliverables. That will be one we take up next month. And as you mentioned in the process, yeah. So you're first.
Question on that process, right? So we kick the can on voting on this, we distribute the backup information on how this was formulated. We chew on it, we come in next time. If we don't like the results of how it's computed, so we don't authorize the letter when it fall out of the period. Is that
We have it to the
is
end
that
of
the fallout?
End of November.
End of November.
Charlie, do you want to give your expert opinion on our opinion of how they arrived at the numbers? Like, my recollection is that our analysis of their analysis doesn't really, they're not going to change it.
Right,
Like,
that was my thought.
There is
Roll
only
the
methodology.
First of all, this is an absolute consistent response to districts. You gotta be kidding me, you're lowballing us on the number. And then it takes a real persuasive argument to increase it, and that argument is sometimes worth making. And they have certainly adjusted, but you know what, we'll give you an extra 20K, or, you know, we get it. So there's nothing to say you should try if it's the appropriate thing to do, but I do think you have to be able to back it up with an argument, like we have concrete evidence that you're missing the following, and we believe that's gonna happen. We expect a multitude of choice students, or whatever it is. And if you can make that argument, I'll consider it, but otherwise.
like if you had actually the
They did
application and the
demographics.
project was going forward in Essex and we didn't know that in February, I think we could push them to change the numbers.
Yeah, that evidence, that, you could say that, and then they'd say, well, all right, so we think it'll be an extra 7 students. Something.
Is it worth it?
That's if it's not, then it's. You make it go back.
I mean, is 7 students?
I don't know what
The
it would be, I just said that randomly. I mean, in other words, if it's 20 units, it could be 40 children, or it could be 7 children. Or maybe it'd be over 50,000, I don't know, you know. I do know they did a demographics. You could go out and do your own demographics. You could go solicit that, pay for a demographic study and say, okay, we have ours, you have yours, why are they different? That'd be another way of approaching it. That would seem like a good, $6 dollars.
My thinking on this is that in the end, and this is just my prediction, we're likely to accept this information that has come to us. We know it's consistent. We know that they have their process that they're going to go with, but it's not a bad idea if we want to wait to have that extra month to get any additional information so that they do have it, that with our acceptance, they have a response saying, and by the way, here's what we've learned. We happen to have someone who has this information, and then we can at least all be accepting the letter with our eyes wide open, knowing how we came to it and what extra info we have.
Agree. So in terms of this list, the execution of the MSBA standard feasibility study agreement. Did you already do that, or?
We get voted in for the next.
Oh, okay. So in terms of this list of things, the only thing we have to do is just this letter here.
Yeah, we owe them one more report by end of week, and then we just have to say, we're okay with this, and we proceed from there. Great. My question to them will be, we've learned some new information, and I'll connect with you to learn how to see how to frame it. Will it move the needle? I guess I would just say, we're getting assessed. Eligibility means, are we ready to go? So they're assessing whether or not we can easily move through our own steps here. And I think it's already a little bit more complicated from what they thought they were signing on to, because the SOI was first straight up. You know, they have all of our history. They know how we came through the process. So they were expecting we're going to build a small elementary school. Memorial process was very smooth. They did all that pre-work. They know what they want. Here we go. And now we kind of already have come back to them and say, well, some things have shifted. Will you work with us? They're working with us. So we're being assessed too. I don't know if anyone has not been moved into feasibility from eligibility. Has anyone ever not been moved further?
Sure.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Well, we don't want to.
It's not.
I didn't know about it publicly, because you would never sort of, I guess.
Okay, so that being the case, fall schedule, you had sent out the list of the dates for the fourth Tuesday. Are we planning to meet in person most of the, or at least for the next time? Is that the plan currently? Yeah. Hybrid if necessary.
What?
Is it the
Just
same?
6 o'clock when we're in the school year? That's okay, people.
What about folks coming in from Boston? Is that possible?
Let me know what you need.
Speak now.
Tyler?
Friends online.
Hello.
This is the 24th. We're talking about the next one. 9/24.
Yes.
I can try to be flexible.
Meryl, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
No, just, going forward, later the better is always better for me personally, but
I'd agree with that.
Seven?
do we have a day of the week that we're typically going to be meeting, or is it going to jump around?
It'll lock in on 4th Tuesdays,
Okay.
which I think is exactly for Memorial.
So the 4th Tuesday of each month, you said?
So
Yeah,
for
I'll be
next
in-
month, to
Okay,
6,
I'm
7.
typically in Boston on those days, so I'll just have to do my best to get back a little early.
Right. For the next meeting then on September 24th, let's do 7 o'clock to allow everyone to get here and see if that works. And if it is feeling like it runs too late, then we can talk as a group and adjust. Is that fair?
That'd be
That's
great.
great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. We don't have any continued business or consent agenda items. Anything else?
Did anyone have trouble getting the information that was associated with the links or getting to the web or we're gonna try whatever? Okay. So
Is that how you're gonna do it going forward? Is that a drop? What is that?
it's just a share. It's the Microsoft version of a Google folder. So most of it will always be on that web page, but the larger documents is sometimes easier to just put in a shared file and then you can go get them.
Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn. So we have a question.
So I mentioned in my intro, I'm a Manchester resident and my kids are at the schools here. So I've actually never been inside the Essex Elementary School. And so looking at some of the reporting that was sent over, you know, it would be great to be able to actually get a tour. I don't know if I'm the only person who's never been inside that building.
It's wonderful.
Sounds great.
What if we have our next meeting at Essex
Yeah.
and we can build in a tour?
Is Andy on this one?
Are you kidding?
Yes,
The
yes.
other school, the-
Yes, I've one in Manchester Elementary and one here in the middle school.
Yeah.
I think Andy would be good. Because he's done so much work in the guts of that, not work, but he's like looking at that.
Is it like, do we want to, I can come early if.
We can set it up that if people want to come at 6:30, we can tour the building and then move into our meeting. Or we can build it into 7 o'clock start and do a half-hour tour and then convene. Let's go 6:30 and then a 7 o'clock start.
6:30 to or 7 o'clock start.
Kim, you're on.
The floors are all shiny, it's ready to go.
It'll look the best it's going to.
First off, it's a boiler.
I'm thinking on the spiral staircase.
This may be premature as well too, but there are some substantive things coming up as you go through the module, like selection, interviews, soliciting proposals, requesting proposals for the OPM and for architect and such like that. Then we should probably have that. Is that what you mean by deliverables, a fall schedule?
So the fall schedule, once we, from how I understand it, once we approve this letter, it will be very light until we get it approved by MSBA to move into feasibility study.
Okay. So
Then we'll meet, but it's going to be on Michelle to issue a request for proposals to start to set up the OPM. So a lot of the technical stuff will go to the business office in terms of soliciting inputs. We're going to have to work with what MSBA gives us for kind of the rules of the road of how to go about issuing the RFP, setting up a selection committee, and I think they hand us the selection criteria. If I'm not.
it's pretty restrictive. Yeah, so what that is.
I think
Can we
we're
get
doing
this
that
taken out
in
of
January.
like we did before? Is that hopefully that's.
That's going to be the main work of this.
OPM ones, the designer ones, they only allow 3.
Yeah, that's what we actually had 3.
That's it.
We did 3
So,
OPMs.
That's quite revealing and quite fun there.
The OPM ones took like 2 or 3 nights in a row where we had people coming in.
Although that was a decision of the committee because they wanted to talk to everybody. You don't have to, you can show us the 3 firms and do it in one night. Just,
So we'll dig into that. My guess on the timeline for that is going to be January, February.
Okay. That's, yeah, just. like-
Unless we really get,
hopefully you get accepted, just there's no.
we're in a little bit of a limbo.
You seem to be eager.
I guess, Gordon, I'd say if we close out in September, they've looked at all of our stuff and they get us in and no, I mean, we'll just move as soon as we're allowed to go to the next step.
Any other questions? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So.
Second, all in favor? All right. We are adjourned at 5:27 PM.
Thanks, everyone, for calling in.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.